My favorite shoes. Although breaking you in sometimes gave the blues, it made you mine. Now I wear you like a second skin with every step I take on the pavement. You help pave the way. Keeping me from some of the rugged paths I chose to take, you ain't fake. Smooth leather insoles, they keep me from the seasons. I never thought to walk out on you, I never had a reason. And every time you think I'm gonna leave, I pull you closer to my feet and tie the strings. Ignoring every urge to replace you, not a yard sale, consignment store, a girlfriend trade you. The shoemaker made you, then I chose to lace you up, you're mine. More timeless than the time I'm blessed just to have you in my closet. The moments we step out, I'd like to pause at. Paparazzi, they take pictures and applause this. Rapport between you and me. You are my kind and you are my favorite accessory.
Dr. Navarro is proud to be a Native American. As a child, he has read numerous of books and is amazed by his culture. Reading Native American books has become his hobby as a child. Dr. Navarro is a Fresno City College graduate. He got an AA and went to Fresno State, earned his bachelor's degree. Dr. Navarro has been teaching at Fresno City College for 8 years. He loves teaching, it's his passion. Dr. Navarro done sermons to express his Native American culture. Community and sermons is what he called it. Dr. Navarro's goals in life is for his students to get a much better education, to think of the world, don't take things for granted, and learn as much as they can and have respect.
Akwaaba, welcome to the Central Valley Cultural Heritage TV show. I'm your host, Alice Jarnigan, and we welcome you.
Akwaaba, Mike Taguvlin, the Central Valley Cultural Heritage Show.
Welcome to Akwaaba.
It's good to be here. Good to be here. It's a pleasure.
Welcome.
Mike.
Dr. Navarro, my first question is, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a foothill community outside of Fresno, about 45 minutes from here. I was born in the Bay Area.
Okay.
But both of my parents were raised in rural communities, and so they felt like maybe the Bay wasn't the best place to raise a family.
Yeah.
And so they ended up moving up to a foothill community outside of Fresno. And so I consider myself a country boy. Yeah, raised in the country, even though I was born in the city.
Yeah.
What kind of impact did that cultural background have on you when you were growing up?
I think a major impact in my life. Coming from a Native American background, I think it's very, very unique in America. There really only are a handful of us in American society. We constitute about 1% of all of America.
Wow.
Yeah, so very, very small numbers. But I grew up in a primarily Native American and white community. And so the racial dynamics were really interesting. And I think I saw very early on there were some clear differences, right, between, say, Western society and Native American society.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way?
I think just our values. Our values are quite different. You know, Native Americans, our culture is centered around the family. You know, the idea of not just mom and dad, but also extended family.
Right.
And so I come from a huge family. My dad has 9 brothers, 4 sisters, always had extended family around, a lot of cousins. Yeah, I think that had a major influence on my life. I would be quite a bit different if I was raised in a different culture. I always tell folks that.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. What a neat way to grow up, too.
Yeah.
But you did have a reputation in the 80s as a bit of a troublemaker, am I correct?
You know, like I said, I grew up in a small community, I would say that my elementary and high school years were interesting.
A little rambunctious.
I was definitely allowed a lot of freedoms. You know, even though I had you know, really good parents, very much involved in our lives, I had a lot of freedom to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And I think that, you know, growing up in the country, you're allowed some of those freedoms.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think part of that experience of you know, living in the country, you know, has opened me up to a lot of things just later on in life.
Right.
Yeah.
We are aware that you had dropped out of high school. What impact upon your life did that have, and then how did you reorient your life in order to go on for a college degree?
You know, I felt, especially in high school, felt extremely alienated. I mean, let's face it, a Western education really isn't set up, I think, for minority groups and people of color. And so I really didn't feel connected to the educational process in high school. So I ended up, my senior year, actually dropping out and earning my GED. And my father wasn't too happy about that, but he ended up getting me a job at a sawmill. And so I actually worked at a sawmill and did some logging and that type of thing, which I think really had an impact on me as well. I think I realized after a couple months that physical manual labor wasn't really my thing. I enjoyed the money, but there was something about education that I was always attracted to.
Right.
Always enjoyed learning, always enjoyed reading, and just learning, especially learning about different people, different groups. Have a real passion for culture in general, and I have a real belief that cultural diversity is good for a society. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you obviously turn yourself around because now you're a professor.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, what universities did you attend?
Well, you know, I ended up going to Allen Hancock College in Santa Maria. I moved away and I was living in a small community near a place called Cuyama. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay,
near Southern California.
Okay.
And I actually drove an hour and a half to go to this community college. This is the closest community college to where I was living. And I took a couple of classes the first semester, and I just loved it. I loved the college environment.
Yeah.
And I think that's just sparked it for me. And from there, I ended up at Fresno City College for 2 semesters, ended up at Fresno State. I earned my bachelor's degree in sociology. I ended up applying to graduate school, went to graduate school at the University of Oregon in sociology, earned my MS there, and eventually my PhD.
Wow.
Yeah.
You went all the way.
I did.
That's fantastic.
I did,
Who
so.
were some of the influences upon, or who encouraged you to your path?
Well, I think intellectually, I had some great professors, really tremendous people who mentored me through every step in the process. And honestly, when I look back at it, I feel very blessed. I feel very blessed to have met some really wonderful people who put me on the right path. But I think too, I really have to give my parents credit for, I think, really instilling really good values in our family, and just this belief that, you know, if we put our mind to something, that we can do just about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after you got your PhD, how did you know you wanted to be an instructor? Like, what made you want to, you know, go on and give back?
I think when I started at community college, just coming in contact with these amazing people who I looked up to. I thought, well, these people are just amazing. They have all this knowledge and they're sharing it, and they really want you to learn. I think that was what was extremely different than my high school experience, where I felt like it wasn't like we were really there to learn. We were really there to go through the process.
Right.
And it was just a completely different experience. And so those role models just really inspired me and kind of gave me that passion to want to be like them.
That's neat.
And like I said, every step of the way I had people who were there to help, people who were there to assist. And people always ask me, well, man, how do you get to a PhD? How do you do that? And I always tell people, you know, I had a tremendous amount of help from a lot of people who were very caring and very loving. And so in that respect, I was very, very blessed.
Yeah, that is a blessing.
Yeah.
So what institution did you first start teaching and what subject?
Well, when I was in grad school at the University of Oregon, I had a teaching fellowship. And so I started teaching there. And then a course in sociology. Then I ended up teaching at West Hills Community College in Lemoore.
Oh, yeah.
When I was working on my dissertation. I ended up moving back to California, got a job in Lemoore. And I was teaching there part-time. And then eventually, while I was working on my dissertation, I was lucky enough to get the Fresno City College position in Native American Studies, which was my real passion, was teaching Native American culture. And again, just being in the right place at the right time, I have one of the best jobs ever. I teach American Indian Studies and I teach sociology.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't ask for a better position.
That is really a blessing.
A really, really wonderful, wonderful profession, teaching. But I, you know, get to basically do something that I enjoy every single day,
Yeah.
which is teach people about the cultures of Native America.
And why do you feel it's important for people to learn about Native American culture?
Well, I always tell folks, it doesn't matter if you're Native American or if you're non-Native, that we should honor our first people here, the First Nations, the tribes that lived on this land, that nurtured this land, that made it what it was before other people arrived after 1492. And so I think we all benefit. It doesn't matter if you're Native or non-Native, that we all benefit from learning something about the first people. And also just general respect, respect for the land that we live on. You know, when I go into my classes the first day of the semester, I always tell my students, this land right here is Yokut's land. That in moral, rightful sense, that this land will always belong to them, and that we're kind of refugees here. Yeah.
Settlers.
You teach, in addition to sociology classes, you teach women's studies. Can you kind of show how they relate?
Teach what?
Women's studies and also sociology, and how where they relate. You know,
Well, you know, in sociology, we always incorporate a gender perspective. In all my classes, I always try to talk about gender, even my Native American studies classes. But gender studies is a very important aspect of sociology. And so I make sure that I talk about a woman's point of view. And I always tell people, too, when we learn about Native communities, is that women always had a prominent role. And honestly, if there's something really good happening in a Native community, there's typically some women, some elderly women behind that. Most of our societies were matrilineal, were matrilocal. In some of our communities, if you were a man and you married a woman, you would go live with her family.
Oh, wow.
You would live with her community. The children would take on her clan name. And so it's quite a bit different than this patriarchal society that we live in today, where the man is typically the one who is given the dominant role in society.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you also taught American pluralism. Could you tell our audience what that is? What's that about?
Yeah, American pluralism is a class that we teach at Fresno City College that really deals with all the cultures that make up America, the United States. And so we're really coming from this dynamic cultural perspective, this perspective that says cultural diversity is healthy, that it's good, that we live in a community here in Fresno where you have several Native American groups, several Hispanic groups, we have African Americans, people from Asia, people have come from all over Europe who've settled here, and not to mention Armenians. I mean, the list is pretty long of our ethnic diversity. So that class deals with that, and also the controversy that comes with it. I mean, we live in a society that is still contending with racism. We have a history of racism in American society, and typically most of our students who come to Fresno City College don't really have that history. And so we try to re-educate them, re-socialize them a bit.
You are watching Akwaaba. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Introduction. I'm new to this phase, but I'm old.